Hey, that only took me 3 times. We are live. For everyone here, we are so happy that you could make time to be here with Dakyndre and myself, Callanturniel, and Dave will be joining us. He has an appointment that ran a little bit later than what was anticipated. So when I see him pop in the room, he'll just show up in the video. So he'll be here. And welcome all of you. So far we have in the house Mel, meaning Mel Jen, and that would be Melissa Jenkins. I'm pretty sure that that's the same handle. We have Nimue and hopefully Draco. We have Astrofel and Merlin is in the house. So we have quite a few people on
Welcome,
today.
everyone.
And Vera Faith might come. There's a couple of other ones that said that they might come too. Silver might be one of the ones that is coming as well, which would be amazing. So anyway, I'm sure that you would like to say hi to everybody before we really get going here.
But yeah, welcome everyone. Nice to see so many familiar people on the feed.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually thinking about how we decided to do this while you're in Hawaii still before you move to Scotland.
Correct.
And I wondered if you have a trajectory of when you plan to go to Scotland at this point.
We do. Currently, it's gotten bumped back. My original plan was to have been gone back in like October, November. Things sidetracked. We had some injuries in the house, things like that, just some delays. And so currently the trajectory is end of May because that will give enough time. Well, it's going to take time to sell my house and finish packing everything. But additionally, for those who don't know, I've mentioned before, but I'm a parent and my son graduates high school this year. And so with the trajectory, end of May is when he graduates. And so it's like, well, I was looking and it was like, oh, cool, I can leave by middle of March, but that's a month and a half. So it's like, just stick it out. Know. So yeah, end of May, I'm going to be relocating from where I currently am on the big island of Hawaii over to Glasgow, Scotland area.
Awesome.
So.
And I'm just popping on and I'm seeing if we can still highlight comments. Everything looks fine, even with the banner. So everything is running okay. And I just put down here that Dave is running late. So for anybody, hearing impaired, because we do have a few folks who can't hear as well, I thought that I would highlight our comment so that they know what's going on. So very good. And okay. Awesome. So we got and I think we caught up with everybody that's in the room. And Mel Jen, and this is in case it's a different person, but I think that it is still Melissa. I'm not positive of that, but I thought that just in case it's two different people, I don't want to oversee or overlook anyone. So okay, well, Dave is not quite here yet, so I guess some of the things that we could talk about, like while Dave isn't here, because he knows your history, like with your background and upbringing and some of those types of things, and Dave isn't going to miss that. So we could actually start with that if you'd like, and then when Dave pops into the room, I'll make sure that we announce him and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, we can go with that. So
yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, we start at the beginning.
Beginning. So for those who don't know, I've been with Tia Eldalieva and now Wall, Way of Arda's Lore, for about 10 years. Yeah, about 10 years. But for me, I've bounced other things. What I bring here is more of the magical aspect from the sort of neo-pagan community. And I've been involved in numerous different things over the years for going on about 25, almost 30 years now. Going back, my upbringing and overall is a little unconventional in terms of some individuals. So for myself, um, I've spent most of my years living in either California, Oregon, where I was born and raised, or the last 8 years, Hawaii. Um, that being said, so originally did not come from families that accepted magic. It was not talked about. It was viewed, anything to do with the neo-pagan community was insanely just satanic and off limits.
Yeah.
I grew
Do
up
you have a particular branch of Christianity that was, or we were
we
just
were
curious?
we were always just a non-denominational.
I
So I
see.
was
Okay. But
raised
it was very
in
fundamental though, still.
extremely
Yeah.
fundamental.
Yeah.
So younger years for me, I was in and out of foster care. So I didn't have the typical from a lot of people where I didn't know. I knew who my mom was, but growing up, I didn't know my dad. I didn't know my cousins, any of that. I later have met them since, but I didn't know. So I was in and out of foster homes. But all of my longer term foster homes, ones where I was in them for 4 to 5 years apiece. So the two biggest ones, those were those foster homes both knew each other. So it wasn't unfamiliar. I went from one to another where I had known the people. But both of those homes were both involved in the same church type setup. They were both very fundamental, to the point that first grade to fourth grade, for example, I was in a private Christian school. And after fourth grade, homeschooled. During that time period, up until I was pretty much 13, I did not hang out with anyone who wasn't part of my private school, which was a strict Christian school. But I didn't hang out with anyone who wasn't part of my Christian school. Later on, my homeschool program, my church, or my youth group. If they were not in those things, I was not allowed to talk to you. If you encountered me
Wow.
in public, I didn't talk to you. Wasn't allowed. It was strictly forbidden. In those homes, I didn't read, movies, books, anything like that was, if it wasn't approved and it wasn't part of the curriculum, we didn't listen to it. We didn't watch it. The only music I was allowed was classical, Christian, and very rarely like oldies, because my foster mom loved that. Outside of that, most music off limits, most movies off limits.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very fundamental Christian, very strict, and that initially shaped my upbringing. So I was raised in a predominantly Christian environment.
Yeah.
That being said, I had to reconcile that and learn that there were things I didn't talk about, because as a kid and growing up, I always had abilities. I saw things others didn't. Um, Things like, for example, I had to learn when I was 8 or 9 that you don't talk about knowing what was in all of your birthday gifts that were sitting on the table. When someone would hand a box, I had to pretend to be shocked and not know, oh my gosh, I've got an RC car in this box. That gets you in big trouble when when your parents are like, you peeked. No,
Right.
I've known.
Actually, I could just see it, right?
Actually, I could tell you what was in the box. Oh, no one else does that. Okay. So living in strict, for me, Christian
Wow.
homes, I had to learn to not discuss what the abilities I had that others didn't. So that was a very weird blending thing that occurred. Things I'd always been able to do and the others didn't. Also discussing topics like otherkin not being entirely human. That was things I learned at a young age. Dave and Lisa know this story, but one of my foster moms, I was probably about 6.5, and I had to learn, oops, don't say things around the people that you'll freak out. But we got cut off one time and by someone, and I was in the back seat, 6.5, and I sigh and responded with "stupid humans." And my foster mom pops off with, "Well, aren't you human, honey?" And being 6.5, no filter, I looked at her in the rearview mirror and went, "Only in appearance." And the size of her eyes were hilarious. So again, things I've always known that
I always liked that one, that comeback.
I had to learn very early on, oops, don't talk about magical things. Don't talk about things that others don't know. So, but that was my initial
Wow,
thing.
that's such a great story. And actually, I'm going to just interject here just a moment, because Merlin had typed also that he says, same here with my family, Southern Baptist, everything is satanic in their eyes. So, you know, wow, like I could see now why we have some folks, and I mean, Vera Faith is not here, but I know she also has had a really strict upbringing, although she's closer to, you know, our age, and like I think she's even actually older. And so there's still a lot of conditioning, you know. I think some of you millennial and younger are going to have a little bit extra, you know, I guess opportunity to shed some of those layers, and part of that is because you've had internet access and stuff a lot longer than you know when we were for those younger who don't and everything know, and that Dave's in the house, and that was the other thing I was going to say.
The younger generations, for me, I'm in my early 40s. So like Lisa said, internet wasn't a huge thing that existed when, I mean, I remember when we got our first computer in the house and then had internet at home. It was, you know, unusual. It wasn't common. But that being said, so at about 13.5, 14, the fundamental foster home that I was in at the time collapsed. Go figure, irony of ironies, the foster dad got caught doing stuff with children you shouldn't. And so that led to the complete collapse of the foster home. So, which ended up being a good thing for me, because at 14, I ended up in group homes. Whole new world, whole new experience. Wow. But again, ward of the court, they had to stick me somewhere. When that occurred, though, that allowed me to get away from the conditioning, get away from the influence that limited me, and allow me to start trying to grow and figure out who I wanted to be as I got older. I realized that because of the upbringing I had, because of the pastors, because of my churches, that if someone came up to me and told me they were Catholic or Buddhist, I automatically hated you. And I didn't know why. I started realizing I don't know a thing about a Buddhist, but I know I've been told to hate Buddhists because they're going to go to hell, because they're not following God. And so I reached this whole thing of, well, why do I hate a Buddhist? What do I know about them? And the more I researched initially or thought about it, I went, I don't know anything about Buddhist. So then I started reading. I went to libraries and started getting books on Buddhism. I went, well, if I'm going to hate something, I need to be able to explain to you why I hate it. Just being said, well, I was told, isn't good enough. So that led me on a quest where I started reading everything I could. I started studying Buddhism. I started studying Catholicism. I started studying, in fact, one of the first books I found at a used bookstore, and I own the book to this day, was called Teutonic Magic by
Kjeldolf Gunderson, right?
Kjeldolf Gunderson.
Yeah, I have that book on PDF, actually.
So I actually encountered it in a used bookstore in the late 90s for like, I don't remember, $3 or something.
Yeah.
And so I read that book. Ironically, it later got confiscated because they said it was weird. The group home's director took it from me.
Wow.
But gave it back later when I left. But that started my thing down the road of what do I need to identify what I believe before I decide to hate something. And the more I read, the more I went, other than having been told, I can't find anything I dislike about a Buddhist. And so I started incorporating aspects of Buddhism. I started going into runic magic and Norse magic. Discovered, hey, there's nothing I dislike about any of these things either. And that actually led me in my early, probably about 15. I made a decision where I had started studying, but I wanted to start practicing. I wanted to start doing offerings to the Nordic gods, to lunar deities, to things like that. And I hit a point in my when I was about 14, 15, where I realized that in order to do that, I had to walk away from my past. I couldn't still say that I was Christian, even though I never fully accepted. And so I had this moment where I was like, what do I do? And the end result was I walked away, renounced my upbringing, renounced my lost friends because of it, that friends that were still talking to me, because all of a sudden I was corrupted by the world. Go figure.
Wow.
But so at 15, I started actively studying what led me on the magical path. And that led me to reading, like I said, all sorts of material. I went from Norse magic into studying Wicca. I went into studying Druidry. I went into studying numerology, all sorts of stuff. I was for a while reading every book I could get my hands on at the local library, because again, this is before the age of internet. Really, Facebook groups didn't exist. Facebook didn't exist.
I mean, it might have been then, like Yahoo groups.
I was going to say, back then, it was a Yahoo chat group. Yeah. I remember having Yahoo Messenger.
We had those back in the day.
And that was early 2000s. So if you were looking for magical knowledge, you pretty much had to find a town that had a bookshop in it, a metaphysics shop, and go. Well, that led me, my studies led me in a small town in California where I was living to encounter a bookshop that no longer exists, but it was called Mystic Journeys. And I actually found that bookshop in the funniest way. I don't know if I think I've told Dave and Lisa this. So 2002, I'm in college, and I've reached all of the books that are available at my library on paganism, and now I'm looking for more. And in the small town I lived in, there were rumors of a bookshop in the next town over, about 30 minutes away. And when I say small town, I'm talking like the town I was in was 3,000 people. The next town over was like 10. And it was like 30 minutes away. Yeah. Well, in that town, I was going to the local college, which was over there. And I had a buddy of mine in a fencing class that we were taking, which was a ton of fun. But I was frustrated one day and was on a phone call with someone. And this buddy of mine who came from a devout Christian home, like I don't remember. I think it was like a Presbyterian or something. It was super strict. But anyway, he walks out, and he heard the tail end of my conversation, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I told him, I said, I've heard rumors of a magic shop in this area. I said, I cannot find it. It's not in the yellow pages that I can see. It nothing,
Wow.
like we said, Dave and Lisa will know. Internet really was spotty at best.
Witchbox might have been the way back then, but they may not have even been on Witchbox yet.
They weren't. And so this buddy of mine tells me, "Oh, by the way, hey, I know exactly where that shop is." And I look at him and I'm like, "How do you know where the pagan shop is?" And I don't. And he's like, "Oh, our youth pastor told us all about it, where the address is, what to do so that we can avoid it." And he's like, "I'll take you down there." So 2002, because he wanted to figure out what he had been avoiding. So
that's amazing.
Ironically
it's like free
enough,
advertising.
Pretty much. So 2002, I walk into Mystic Journeys, and the owner of it is a woman named Karen Rydbeck. She's since sadly passed this last year. But she ran the shop. I went in, started buying books, crystals, all sorts of stuff that I had never found before. And through her in the training, I ended up, she became originally just a business that I frequented. Over the next probably couple years, she became a really good friend. And in the long run, probably, so I would say 2004, she had never taken a student ever. She did some light meditation classes, but at that time, and she'd been practicing for 45 years, she had never taken a student, never trained anyone. And I wasn't originally looking for it. It sort of happened, but she became my mentor. And that started, as Dave and Lisa have also known in the past, that started about a 5-year period. So up into about 2009, where I was undergoing extremely formalized training. It wasn't in a specific path, but it was, she would have me read books, for 6 months on summoning elementals.
Well, in a way, she had it be where, like, it wasn't a group thing. This was like literally, like, she was your mentor.
This was one-on-one.
And you were the apprentice. Like, that's how the old days were.
Right. And it was very much one-on-one, but it was structured lessons. For this 6 months, we're going to be working on, elementals and summoning spirits. For the, and during that period, we were meeting sometimes 2-3 times a week, and we would meet for hours, 3-4 hours. And it would be, okay, where I'm going to have you read this material and then come back. And so that 5-year period really formalized, in essence, my magical training and experience, took the sort of eclectic style I had and grounded it into where, like I said, I was learning different herbs, I was learning different runes, it was no longer just reading things, it was very formalized training. Again, like Lisa said, old days, so eventually Karen, though, went from being just a teacher and a mentor to being a really good friend. And I've known her up until she passed, this last year. I'd known her for 20 something years. So I'd known her for a long time. Wow. And she was fundamental in the magical education that I received.
Yeah, because I could imagine with and by the way, this is really directed at many of you who maybe have like a really sheltered upbringing, okay, for whatever reason it is. and you're learning on the internet, I know that there was probably some, because luckily, you know, you didn't get in too much trouble because the internet wasn't what it is today. And I was thinking about how it could have been really easy for you to stray into really difficult territory, not having like someone solid like Karen helping. You know, and I know that many people that are watching and that maybe don't have a mentor to help them. What would you suggest for people who, well, maybe attracting a mentor might be a good idea, right? Like, but would you like think that there's maybe some online programs now like that people could possibly like look into? And I know that a lot of them cost money, and then, you know, then it gets to a weird place of like, well, now they're only doing it for money and, you know, stuff like that. So
that is a good question.
I mean, I hope that we're going to be filling in that part like with our curriculum, because I would like to be like where people could come and, you know, have at very low cost, or, you know, depending on the need, even like on the house, you know, having people that are trustworthy, and our goal is not that you make money with, you know, any of this stuff. Like, we're not going to trick you. We're not going to be having you like doing a bunch of drugs or something, you know, to like, oh, I'm so spiritual, like I'm a shaman now, and, you know, just doing all these crazy things that we see online right now.
Well,
we're hoping to like create a container, and I'm hoping that Dakyndre will go into more of that later.
Actually, if anyone wanted to have direct shamanic training with me, I am an entheogenic practitioner, so they would have to use entheogens. But that's really orthogonal to the Legendarium.
And again, you would probably vet that person and make sure that they could handle it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
because a lot of people can't. They need training. They need reorientation in their conscious, like kind of like therapy almost, so that they can handle like some of the places that may open up.
Right, and like a Taoist sage, they would have to come to me. I wouldn't go to them, you know. So
of course, and again, that's what I mean by attracting. And so, in a sense, like I'm hoping that
I would also say,
people watching this video, they're kind of like, hey, I really like this Elven Path thing. I was raised strictly Christian. This feels safer because of the whole Tolkien thing, and Tolkien was really Catholic, and, you know, so this is probably a safe path. Yes, we are. Okay, just saying. Been there for, you know, like nearly 20 years now, come August. And yes, we are very, you know, we're very much invested in people growing in the way that they are supposed to, like where they could integrate their, if you will, relationship with Jesus, etc., and still having a practice grounded in a form of paganism that like feels okay for them. And we're not Christo-pagans, so I just want like people to know that that's not what we are either, because Dakyndre and I are straight up pagan. I would say that Dave is shamanic. Okay, so we're not Christians, meaning you're bored. However, I think that, and especially in Dakyndre's case, his background is going to be very useful for some of you who are Christians, and navigating that, and how you would navigate your Christianity, and how much you want to hang on to things that you feel good with, and then dropping away the stuff that you don't feel good about. Like, for instance, maybe you really love the idea of Jesus, but the churchianity thing is like not happening.
Well, or even unlearning the guilt. Like, a lot of the church's upbringing was fear-based. A story I didn't go on, and then I'll touch on something else, was one of the things that I eventually walked away from was there were too many questions. At 15, as I said before, I left my Christian upbringing behind. because I couldn't reconcile it with the abilities and the things I was learning. But one story that to this day really impacted me, and I remember vividly, I was 9 years old, and to this day, our pastor at our church, his name was John. We always called him Pastor John. I was talking about what I was going to be when I grew up, what I was going to do with my life, kid stuff, but this is what I want to be when I grow up. And I remember to this day, one of the things, and it stuck with me, but I said, when I grow up, this is what I'm going to be. And Pastor John, we were at a church picnic, and he turns and looks at me and says, "Oh, don't worry about that, because we're in the end times, and before you are 18, Christ is going to come back and you'll be dead. We'll all be in heaven."
Oh my God.
That is the most messed up thing you can say to a 9-year-old. Is
not to mention false. I mean, what did he think how did he think he knew that? Like,
it's an overlying
wow.
theme. It's an overlying theme in the Christian community. That
millennialism, I think they call
it. Or apocalyptic.
That we are in the end times. We've been, it's always being used, but it's basically a fear. It's a fear tactic of, don't bother what happens. We're in the end times. It's kind of, I always say, and it's not to knock the people that believe in it and works for, but to me, a lot of the overarching church and aspects of Christianity is almost to me the same as a death cult. They're so obsessed. All of my upbringing, we were so obsessed about forget what happens here and now and worry about what happens when we die. So that aspect, but like I said, that led me to walk away. But you asked things on mentors. Mm-hmm. That's a touchy one, because from what I've encountered over the years, oftentimes if a person's charging for a mentorship, they're not always that good. The ones that are really good are going to oftentimes be extremely hesitant to train anyone.
Even just hard to find.
Or even thing. My mentor, Karen.
Because they're not advertising, right? So,
well, they have no desire to.
Right.
Like I said, Karen had practiced 45 years when I met her, and she was in her 60s. She had turned down wealthy clients, people who wanted her to train them in magic, and who had said, "Hey, I will pay you, $300, $400, $500 a month to train me." She turned down people because she didn't want the responsibility. So a lot of the really good mentors aren't going to be training, because you take responsibility for that student and everything they do and learn.
And I do know people that like collect money, but they also are very choosy about who they choose, because it's got to be an energetic match. And
exactly.
It needs to be, where, I mean, not just, oh, wow, you have money. Cool. I'll take it. And, I mean, Dave and I can tell you, just from starting our path 20 years ago, I can't tell you how many messages I've rejected where they're like, "Hey, I want to be an elven priestess. What do I do?" And I'm thinking, I'm not an elven priestess. I mean, like, I don't even consider myself that. But we would just send them the Legendarium and then say, "Hey, have at it." Like, if you want to, like, this is all we can do. And
the other thing that I would also stress to those who are wanting to learn and go through things, a lesson that my mentor must have hammered into my head. I'm a Leo, so stubbornness is in my thing. I think she must have used a 10-pound hammer to get that into my head. The number of times I caused headaches for her.
Oh my gosh.
Is patience. Patience. And the reason I say that is when I was younger, and I know a lot of new pagans it's, ooh, okay, I got to learn this and learn how to do all of this so that I can get really powerful. I want to get really strong. I want to learn the strongest things. And the lesson that my mentor over and over and over, she must have told me a million times, and I didn't understand. It literally wasn't until like 10 years ago or something, in the entire 20 years I've known her and the 5 years that I was apprenticing under her, I didn't get it by the time we were done. She constantly told me, do not study for knowledge, do not study for power, study for wisdom. That was what every time I would start getting impatient and want to learn stronger magic or study this because it was a quick path to power, she would just, no, we're going to study for wisdom. And I never understood it. And then years later, what I came to realize, and I'll go into more of my pagan experiences of groups I encountered, when you study for wisdom, you will gain knowledge. When you gain knowledge, you will gain power. And it will be a balanced and tempered learning experience because you will have the knowledge needed to handle magically any situation you encounter and the wisdom to know how much to use. So an analogy that I use is, there's no point in using a nuke when a hand grenade would have done the job. But a lot of people that are going for power are just going to be like, hey, I want to learn, show me how to use the nuke. And it's like, well, yeah, but you could have solved it with
I mean,
grenade.
Sometimes it's only a fly swatter too.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't need to, take out the entire wall.
Sometimes, your energy conservation is important as well.
But yeah, so that would be my topic on mentors, is patience, and be, even as someone, if you're looking for one, be discerning, because a lot of people, even on Facebook groups and all the time, I see it where people, a lot of times, if you're not careful, they'll take your money, but they're not going to be legitimate. They're, oh, you want to make, make extra money, buy this oil I sell that'll, do it. I left a group recently because the majority of the group was admins using it basically to hawk their junk. And there was one who she was putting 24 karat gold flakes into her make money oil, which might work, but she's charging $200 for this oil to make money. And I'm like, the only one making money is
only
you.
about $20 worth of
product.
Probably less than that, actually.
Well, see, right there, it already did work. She's making money for herself. So,
right.
There you are.
But that is a different kind of magic.
Correct. So in terms of people,
that is a magic that is manipulative, and by the way, I'm not going to say that it wouldn't help somebody, because I think maybe that person that said, oh my God, this is going to work, and maybe their lesson is to learn how valuable they are, like that they don't need external validation. They can learn internally how powerful they are, but that might be part of their journey. And the thing is that the trickster energy is something that we have to learn about. It's one of the things. And
so also over the years, like I said, one thing everyone always, a lot of people I've talked to have always said, oh, it must have been so cool to have a mentor. It was, and it wasn't.
Oh, I'll bet.
Because one, it was in a ton of intensity. I was learning a ton of things, but additionally, I had to deal with the fact that it ostracized me to some extent from the rest of the pagan community, because a lot, not all, but a lot of them haven't unpacked their own internal
that
issues.
Is for sure. Yeah.
And so what I encountered in 2007, for example, while I was still under a mentorship, and it was fine, I had permission, in Redding, California, I joined a coven of about 30 people. I realized very quickly that the high priest and priestess of the group were manipulating people and using, like, you would start a ritual, it would they would redirect the energy. I ended up leaving the group for that reason. But when I say it ostracized, I've been denied access to groups because the person realizes that I've read a lot. It's not that I'm better. It's not that I'm, grand poobah of magic and I can, wipe the floor with people. No. But what I've discovered over the years is a lot of the covens out there are designed to not consider the members, but rather to fulfill the needs of, I would say, admiration that the leaders want. And so when you come along, and I had no interest in leading the groups, I didn't want to lead a group, just like I never intended to be on the board of this group.
I know, none of us did, actually.
But over the years,
that's another story.
It led to being ostracized, having had a mentor. And so for a long time it was,
well,
I was
did
solitary.
you think that there was some jealousy, or do you feel that there might have been, like, because, like, I'm sure that your mentor was like, slow down, Dakyndre, one step at a time, like, meaning master this, and
work
then
on
you'll
this,
master
and
this,
then
and like, there's no breaks when people are studying their own thing. They're just searching everywhere on the internet, and they're going to find it come hell or high water, and they may actually be missing some steps.
I wouldn't say it was jealousy. I never encountered jealousy.
I just wondered if there was jealousy involved, but okay.
What I did encounter was oftentimes, in essence, fear. Because I would come into the group and it was, oh no, he's going to, like, upstand us and usurp the group because he knows more than we do. And it was like, well, I've had formalized training. I'm just looking to hang out with peeps. I don't
right. Yeah, you're not looking at usurping anybody's power.
Right. I don't want title.
It's much easier to generate your own, actually.
I want friendship rather than, being like, look at me, I'm the head of this group. I didn't want
maybe
that.
For some people it's harder to do that. I didn't think about that.
So 2007, I encountered that group and then left. 2009, I was denied a group because of that reason. Of the council, like, the head people were afraid. They even called my mentor at one point, like, you didn't name drop mentors, at least I didn't. And I ended up having to, because part of their interview process was they were only taking formally trained people, and I was like,
oh, right. And sometimes you have to tell them Gardnerian or whatever it is that you're learning and who it was.
In this case, I had to tell them that Karen trained me, and the person that was there was like, she doesn't take students. And I'm like, she did me.
Right.
And they're like, no, she doesn't. And I was like, oh, whatever.
God damn it. Like, here's her phone number.
Well, they already had it.
I'm sure.
And so I get home and I call Karen and I'm like, hey, Karen, heads up. You're probably going to get a call. Sorry. And she'd already gotten a call and gave a review, and then they never, that never went well. So, so for the most part, over the years, magically and pagan wise, I've been, for the long time, mostly eclectic and solitaire. I never had a full path because I never felt a commitment to one. I never felt the calling that people are like, I'm a, Gardenian Wiccan and that's all I've ever been. No, I was just like, I'm learning. I'll use what I use and discard what I don't. So fast forward a bit to, what was it? About 10 years ago, 2015, but even I'd say almost 2 years before that, probably 2012, I encountered on YouTube and Facebook and made friends with a former individual named Kimberell. Kimberell, eventually, in just following her on YouTube and Facebook, she joined with, in probably 2015, she joined with Tia Eldalieva for a short bit. And
well, we had actually some correspondence with her, but she didn't partner with us, but we did talk to her. So she knew who we were for a while. I remember her partnering up with somebody a little less Elven, or like in the more gay guy or whatever.
Morg,
like she partnered with them. And
when did she actually join TE though? Because
her actual formal joining of us was 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was interacting with.
She was definitely interacting with us, because I had a lot of people come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, did you find this?" Like lots of people, just came up and like, "You need to talk to Kimberell." And I'm like, "Wow, she seems pretty cool." So, we struck up some conversation, and there was, some things going on. Let's see, it says Mel Jen says, "Kimberell was a nice gal. I hadn't seen her around in a very long time." No one has.
No one has, Mel Jen.
I think that she literally fell offline in 2022.
I would say 2022, the last any of us, Mel, have heard.
We do not know what's going on with her.
The last update I had.
Like, if Kimberell is watching or secretly, like, whatever.
Yeah.
We wish you well, like, you know what I mean? Like, we want good things. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no hard feelings or anything at this, at this level. But we just we are concerned that she kind of fell away from everything, and we do hope that that it's not in a bad way. You know what I mean?
There was an update.
Something happened or something.
No, there was an update 3 years ago, shortly after she fell off of the internet, that she was dealing with mental health and personal issues.
Oh.
And that was posted by someone who knew her and was talking to her at the time. And they had said she would be back at some point, but she never has. She stepped away. But anyway, so about a decade ago, maybe a little bit more, through Kimberell, I found Tia Eldalieva and started looking at what the group was about and getting to, attending the YouTube things.
Yeah,
and the
sometimes
group things.
We did rituals even back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You had some sporadic ones.
Like, it was like, well, we actually had them on Skype or, other platforms first, because those didn't, have a thing. Then we did I think one of our first live stream rituals, we ended up doing it on Facebook, and that was such a janky experience. Like, if you guys, it's in our archives. I actually uploaded a copy of the 2018, I think, ritual that we did the first time. And it was terribly, it cut out all the time. I mean, it was just not a good time to do live streaming. It didn't get well until later.
Lisa,
yes.
When did you bring me back in? What year was that?
2019.
Okay, all right. So
it was before that. Okay. So we did a ritual, and I forget what it was for, but it was, we didn't do well with the live streaming thing until, and interestingly, COVID was happening around the time that we became a nonprofit, and the nonprofit happened because of Kimberell's audience. And that's how Dakyndre came to us. So
and
we are thankful for that.
So prior to that, as I mentioned, about 14 13, 14 when my foster home fell apart, and I was able to explore and read things and access material I had never accessed before. I went into a massive self-discovery phase at that time. And one of the things I encountered back in that period was the Lord of the Rings material, because I went on a fantasy fiction binge. And so I was reading, I was reading Deathgate Cycle, which is a book series by Margaret Weiss, Tracy Hickman. I was reading all of the Dungeons and the Dragonlance books. I was reading Forgotten Realms. I was reading.
Wow. Yeah.
I was reading magical, historical, religious, philosophical, everything I kind of had been denied. I went on a just insane binge of learning, catching up in a sense with the outside world. And one of the things I encountered was Lord of the Rings, but it was The Hobbit, all of those, Silmarillion, those different books. But the difference was that at that time, I read them as purely fantasy fiction. It wasn't until years later when I found Tia Eldalieva that I was like, oh, I knew there was something special about the books. I'd always thought there was, the Legendarium, but I'd never encountered anyone who had said anything different or could provide, again, evidence. For me, it was very much evidence. I wasn't just going to fall into a group and be like, well, we believe that, the Greek goddess Artemis, rides around on a Harley Davidson because she told me she did. No, I wanted, I'd encountered far too many people that were like doing that. So I've become very much over the years with evidence. If I'm going to believe something, I need to be able to back it up. And in my years of studying with Dave and Lisa, Dave especially, Dave would be like, well, Tolkien said, this. And Dave could be like, look, letter number, 108.
Yeah.
108. And so Dave and I connected before I was ever involved heavily with the group. And the more I was around, the more I went, ooh, I like this. This is a spirituality that worked. But I was still eclectic. If you asked anyone, I didn't, fully practice any Tolkien spirituality. I was intrigued by it, but I hadn't really felt a calling, but I was studying. Same thing, patience, slowness. Dave and Lisa started, the more I had questions, over time, it wasn't like I came into the group and was like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah,
and,
you didn't have like a list of like, I want these 20 things answered right now.
No, it was just like periodically I would reach out.
Yeah.
Mainly to like Lisa or to Kimberell at the time. She'd go to Dave or someone else and then come back and be like, oh, hey, so they said this, and then I would research. So that was, like I said, right around that was a while back. And then eventually Kimberell left. I stayed behind when she went on
she
to
left,
do other things.
She left on Midsummer, or what we would call Tarning Austa, the gates of summer. She left on that very day in 2020. So literally when we became, because we became a nonprofit by the IRS on May 1st, 2020, because we had sent in the paperwork in fall of 2019. And by the way, while we're talking about that, Dakyndre was one of our largest by far early donors before he was a board member, before any of this type of stuff was happening. He was actually the one that got that approved. So like, meaning with the $600, because we had to raise some money, and he was like the largest donor. So and it's by a lot. I don't remember, like,
I don't either.
the dollar amounts, but I just remember it was like Dakyndre, the next donor, the next donor, so you know what I'm saying. Interesting. We have a couple of comments. Silmarillion did it for me. This is what Mel Jen says. I went searching for spirituality surrounding it after reading that first section. That's
Likewise.
me, and that will be in my interview, so I will understand that. Delayed on my end. Okay, I'm not sure what that's about.
And then Vera Faith this year. Welcome.
Hey, Vera Faith. We were just saying, you know, where is Vera Faith? So here she is. Yay! She is somehow in the chat.
So yeah, in that aspect, the more I interacted with Dave and Lisa and asked questions and studied, the more I realized just how much more depth there was to the Legendarium and the spirituality of it, and to the point that in 2020, when Kimberell left, Dave and Lisa approached me and requested if I would be interested in joining the board. And it took me a while to contemplate on that one because, again, I had no interest. I never really have in running a group. I don't want the title. I don't care about being like, I'm the president of the organization or I'm the director of spirituality. I don't care.
Well, you didn't start off as the president either.
No,
so
I didn't.
That helps.
I didn't want that. I would have probably ran for the hills.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have been gone. We're going to stick you in this. No.
Yeah. No, it's much better having you be the president and me be the treasurer, secretary, whatever the hell it is, and Dave be the lore master, because this is ideal now. Like, so, it's actually a really good mix right now.
So I would say that for my own pagan path, in the last 5 years especially, I committed to where this is the primary solitary path. Even for quite a few years, I told everyone, oh, I'm eclectic. You know, if they asked, I don't have even when I was studying this, I wasn't ready to be like, no, this is what I do. And within the last, I'd say 5 years, especially after becoming a board member, it allowed me to have a lot more in-person, well, digitally, but in-person conversations, especially with Dave, and realize the depth of because like you did in your interview, Dave, you've been doing this since you were like 10. So the amount of knowledge you have allowed me to ask.
And we're old people now too.
It allowed me to ask a ton of questions. And so over the 5 years, I've pretty much dropped away. I still study a ton of other stuff, but I'm no longer eclectic in where I'm at now. Way of Arda's lore, originally Tia eldalieva, is where I've grown to. And mainly because I don't see, it's not that the others are less real to me. I still acknowledge that for those that it works for, great.
Yeah.
But for myself, none of it ever resonated deeply enough for me to be like, you know, I'm going to use.
I understand that.
Now, that being said, there are additional things that I do not bring, and Dave and Lisa know this, that I do not bring into Way of Arda's lore. And one of those, for example, that I still practice and have since probably 2004, I've studied various types of dragon magic. I started in Sumerian dragon magic, moved eventually into studying some of the Chinese. Living out here in Hawaii, for example, The legends and lore and sacred places to dragons are countless. Although Hawaiian doesn't have a word for dragon, it's actually mo'o, M-O apostrophe O, which is lizard, but it's the same thing.
Wow.
Lizard is the Hawaiian word. It's still a dragon.
Yeah.
But there's no word for dragon, so they used lizard. But that is something that is still probably one of the few types of magic that I actively practice outside of the Legendarium path. And the main reason for that is that we did a video a while back on that. And all of Tolkien's writings on dragons and stuff within the Legendarium is that they are dark, evil creatures you don't mess with. He had some writings. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to give a real, for people who haven't seen that one, to give a real short definition, in Tolkien's works, dragons are basically genetically bioengineered weapons. That's what they are, you know.
And Tolkien had some.
And that's not even far off, even when you do dragon magic and stuff. Like, I would even say that that's a pretty good description, even outside of the Legendarium.
Depends on the path.
Really?
Most of it,
yeah. Okay.
Well, for example, in Sumerian magic, Tiamat was the dragon queen and was a goddess of creation in Sumerian in the like Enuma Elish and those types of tales.
Elish, yeah. Okay.
She had 11 children who were all dragons. They ended up killing her and making the earth and everything from her. So she wasn't exactly.
Yeah, that's an origin story for sure.
She was a bit. Tiamat, for example, was a bit nutty. So even in that, some of the dragons. But if you get out into Chinese and the 4 dragon kings of China, which they have a human form, a dragon form, and each one has an animal form. There's a tiger one. There's they have things. They are considered extremely benevolent. They are not biological weapons at all. They are very much beings that protected China and taught culture and civilization. So it really, Tolkien's was a bit unique. There are some dragons that are, like I said, that are, nuttier than a fruitcake, but most aren't. However, Tolkien did write specifically they were. And he wrote some stuff outside of the Legendarium. But because he didn't write that they were, I won't incorporate it, because that to me would be degrading the path. And I see that too often in my years in the magical community, where people will cherry pick and just hodgepodge things together, even if they don't necessarily work. So in the last 5 years with this group, for me, it's been very much a looking at what was written and sticking to it. And that's different than what I've done in the past.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's so like I said, over the years, that's been my studies. I've had some really amazing experiences with my mentor, different things I've encountered. So it was an interesting journey.
Cool. I'm glad that you specified that. And another thing that I guess was kind of a question, and this was going more back to your attraction to elven energy. You were talking about early on that you had some abilities that you couldn't really talk about in your background. Would you say that any of those were if you will, elven abilities or something like that? Was there something also behind your attraction to Tolkien through the elven, if you will, energy or archetype?
Yes. So as I mentioned early on, and I'm comfortable sharing this story, but as I shared the other one earlier about telling my foster mom at 6.5 that, I only looked human. That was one that for the longest time I went with the idea that, what was it? That I wasn't entirely human. I didn't know what I was, but I was more than what I looked. And that was something I knew instinctively, even as a kid. The elven aspect came much later, as Lisa said. In my teenage years, there was a specific incident where a group of us were on a hike, really beautiful area, a couple hours east of Sacramento up in the Sierra Nevada foothills. And there was this lake up in that area called Alpine Lake. Really beautiful area. We were hiking out there, and there's a giant rock. I have the photo somewhere still. But there was this giant rock that had to have been 10, 15, maybe 20 feet tall. Was dome shaped. And we were all, being teenage guys, all of us were arguing. Well, I was watching more, laughing at all of them. They were trying to go up the rock to see who could get up on the top of the thing and, for bragging rights. And they kept trying to do it. They couldn't. They'd get a
And
couple
how old
feet
were
up.
you again?
Probably 16, 15.
Oh, okay. So you were a teenager. Okay.
I was a teenager at the time in this one. And it was hilarious watching them try to go up the rock and then fall. And so I came out and I was like, finally they were like, no one can get up there. And I'm like, I can do it, because I'd been watching. There was a tree nearby the rock, probably about 3.5 feet away from the thing. And instinctively I looked at it and went, that's easy. You see parkour people do it all the time before parkour was really a thing. I looked at the rock and went, I can get up that. And it turned into this whole back and forth about, no, you can't, we can't do it. And we're more athletic than you. Because at the time, I'm almost 5'10" now. But at the time I was 5'1" and about 80 pounds soaking wet.
Okay.
So the 5'1" person telling the much more athletic individuals that I could get up there and they couldn't, they're like, yeah, no. So I took a run at the rock, and hit the rock about 2.5, 3 feet up, and pushed off the rock, hit the tree, pushed off the tree, back to the rock. Did that about 3 or 4 times until I was up on the rock. And I remember I had a disposable camera with me because digital cameras weren't a thing.
Right, not yet.
And I threw the camera down and was like, ha, I beat all of you. Take a picture. And so I still to this day have the picture of me sitting on this rock. And when I came down, one of 4 of the guys that had been hazing me, the first comment out of their mouth was, dude, you must be an elf. No one, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. It wasn't till many, many years later that when I discovered TE and started looking at things, that I realized that from the elven perspective, it resonated very heavily with who and what I am and what I'd always been. But so it did provide a much more.
And you also have some Swedish heritage that has elven energy involved in your
Correct.
surname's family, right?
Further back in my line, yes. If you read Elves, Rights, and Trolls by Keldorf Gunderson, one of the things he says in his introduction is, in most Swedish families, I'm half Swedish, quarter Dutch, quarter Welsh. But he says very heavily that most Swedish families can eventually trace their heritage to an ancestor who very much is viewed as not human. There's entire regions of Sweden where it was always thought, hey, the elves of the forest live there, or the beings live there. So when you do your genealogy, you can always reach up somewhere in your line a family member, usually, which again, I didn't know my family until I was in my 20s. I ended up meeting my biological dad, and through that meeting my aunts, and then getting into my genealogy. But I also had a grandfather who used to tell stories to me, who I met. I met my grandfather when I was like 13, 14, while I was in the group home. And when I was hanging out with him for a short bit, he was telling stories of things passed down. So for me, the elven aspect of the path really resonated with who I was, and actually lent a lot of ability to learn more.
Very good. Very good. So I wonder if anybody has any questions. I'm looking in the comments, and so far I haven't seen anything, and I probably have a few more questions already. One of them that occurred to me was something that I thought about, because I believe that you and I in the pagan part of our background have not identical stories, but certainly similar themes, where I did not wish to commit also to a particular pagan path. I wanted to keep it open, and I studied a lot of them, and I liked a lot of aspects with them. But what I did notice about a lot of covens, and again, I think that you were trying to talk about this when you were saying like about some of the people that formed the group, and that they kind of did it for attention and like, you know, those types of things. I have to say that sometimes I feel like when people create the covens, it's almost like it creates like an egregore or some kind of, you know, energy form. And depending on the reason for the coven, it might be of an energy that is like, if you will, hungry all the time, wants energy all the time. And that might get inadvertently created because many people who are finding covens and these types of things haven't had, you know, for instance, you know, understanding psychologically what's going on in their own families and things like that, the brokenness of, you know,
Right.
like in a Christian home, and then they think, oh, I'll just leave all this behind, but they don't realize that they are bringing that broken family structure into their circles sometimes, or, you know, they may not realize what they're doing, and then it turns out to be that it's always it's like, in other words, it creates a new dysfunctional family. Okay.
Almost.
If that makes sense. And it's like that the energy of that coven, like, meaning, you know, let's just name it whatever that gathering is, like it has like its own hunger, and feeds off of everybody. So not just people that are new members and newbies and everything, but it feeds off of the high priest and high priestess, and literally can triangulate and do all of the things: narcissistic personality disorder, anxious attachment style, avoidant attachment style, golden child, scapegoat, like all of the things that you read about dysfunctional families could literally be overlaid sometimes in a coven structure. And I'm talking about one that is unaware.
Right.
Okay. That's and I found time and again that most covens that I was invited to join had these kinds of patternings. You know, where it, and I'm not saying it's bad, because everybody is totally looking at trying to heal themselves, especially if they are breaking away from a really unhealthy family structure. But sometimes when we're breaking away, we don't realize, you know, that we still have that conditioning even when we're seeking something different.
I would say that's accurate. I would say also it goes back to, at least for my experience, a lot of it is, again, with, I got lucky with having a formal mentor, a teacher and trainer.
Yeah.
It oftentimes, if you aren't careful, a lot of times it's a lack of knowledge. Like you said, it can be created sometimes inadvertently. I recall, for example, I don't remember her name now, but in Sacramento, California, there was a well-known pagan priestess. She used to host open circles, I can't remember her name. She may have passed, for all I know. I never joined her group or worked with her directly, but she wasn't necessarily negative, but the benefit of a formal training was my mentor kind of walked me through and taught me pitfalls not to make.
Wow.
So you could absolutely create an egregor or something like that without intending to.
Yeah.
This particular lady, and it wasn't her fault, she was a wonderful person, but she did probably 15 or 20 years of doing what's called invoking a particular goddess to a circle. And she would do this once a month, periodically, full moons, whatever. The biggest issue that she ended up having, and I feel terrible for her, but again, it's knowledge. After 20 years of doing this, she started having health issues. And her reason was little mistakes, like you said, whether it's an egregor, whether it's things like that, unintentional. This particular person, she routinely invoked a goddess that had never been human. So little details like, hey, I'm going to let you in for the half hour that this ritual is going on, but for the half hour that you're occupying my meat suit, my body needs to continue doing all of the functions that it's doing when you took over. She didn't necessarily do that.
And she
so
didn't know to ask for that. Like,
to ask for that.
Only
so after
use
20,
this or get all the way out when you're done and restore me back to my form.
Primarily. So for
half
an hour, her kidneys weren't really doing what she ended up with. Kidney issues. She ended up with a ton of issues
is not anything
that the doctors
couldn't. With people. No.
Well, the doctors couldn't figure it out.
Yeah,
why does she have these health issues? Well, it's energetic because for 20 years she's been invoking a. So idea, you know, the end result was, she went into all sorts of health issues because she brought a being that had never been human. So it was like kidneys. I don't know what those do. The breathing, sure.
Like especially like if you've never been in and our bodies are very complex. very complex. Like, I mean, you know, we talk about this being in, you know, there are a lot of energies out in the, you know, like in the fourth dimension or wherever you want to call it, that would absolutely love to have a human meat suit, because we actually, if we knew what we were doing, we have inherently an amazing amount of power. Okay, we really do. And most of it has been locked down because beings, and you can like read stories, the Anunnaki and, you know, like the Elohim and all of the stuff, they locked down a lot of the powers in humans in order to, you know, for maybe nefarious reasons, like, hey, you know, this is the perfect slave, you know, they have all this power, but if they don't know that they're this powerful, then they'll do what we want.
But
right?
I
go
just
ahead,
want
Dave.
to. I just, when you guys are done with this section, I just wanted to give a very brief thing about my. I don't want to take away from your interview, so it'll be
not
very
at
brief.
all.
But I just want to tell very brief about my perspective on the whole organization and so forth.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well,
actually, go ahead. It's
okay.
perfect timing.
Yeah, we're pretty much done with that idea. So go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unlike, and this is for the new people who don't know me or anything about me or whatever. I already have an interview that I
We have
did.
an interview, but you've talked
So,
more about
yeah,
shamanism, but we didn't
right,
cover everything about shamanism. So
right.
you could
So,
add it here. That's fine.
basically, unlike Lisa and unlike uh,
Dakyndre.
Dakyndre, I used to have a really bad stuttering problem. Now it's gotten a lot less, but sometimes on certain words I hesitate. Anyway, basically, I'm I suppose you would say theologically, I'm a scientific atheist. But I'm also a shaman, so I can directly perceive spirits. So I'm a scientific atheist, but I'm not a scientific materialist. That's the big difference. Scientific materialists don't believe there any such things as spirits exist. They think that's all delusional bullshit.
Oh, I see.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
so I'm a bit of a strange mix there, but
I would say you have a little bit of animism as well. But
yeah, true.
Yeah, like not
And,
just straight atheism, but
and also,
yeah.
Lisa has referred in other videos, but I think more of her personal videos where she has other channels where she does her own stuff that's separate from the path. But she
Right.
refers to herself as a light worker. I'm more dark
At
side
times,
oriented
yes.
directly just by nature. And there's a guy who came up with a good term, dark walker, and I'm going to post the link to this definition into the chat here, and then into the private chat, and then
Okay.
Lisa can the guy has a really good explanation of what this sort of orientation actually is, you know. So I just wanted to give a very brief thing there about my, relation to it and my worldview. So
Okay.
there you are. And then that's basically all I wanted to say. You guys can continue. Shamanism for me came in much later. I had the natural talents when I was young, directly detecting spirits. I just didn't know what they were, but the actual practice of shamanism came in from age 40 onwards. So
yeah, and actually you are unique in that your teachers are not corporeal. You know what I mean? Like
right,
you haven't had a human alive teacher.
Right, it's
The
the direct.
spirit world has been what's been teaching you.
Yeah, it's the direct plant spirits. I
Yeah,
use
in this case, in your case, plants. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A particular plant.
I
And
use
then-
Selvi Divinorum as my ally. So yeah, it's the
Yeah.
direct plant spirits.
And that's not one that's very easy for a lot of people to access.
Right.
Yeah.
Now and then, so like I'd said earlier, I've been with Way of Arda's lore now, and then TE for about 10 years. What I've been focusing and what my function, Dave, as we know, is our lore master and kicks ass at it. He is fantastic.
Oh, yes.
But what my focus and what I tend to bring to the group as a whole is I've brought a lot of the magical knowledge from different aspects of things from my years of training, and the role that I primarily fill here and have for the last 5 years is, for lack of a better term, we still haven't found one that works just yet, is Director of Spirituality. And what my
meaning
role,
like the head of clergy or the head cleric,
right.
But we don't like that word.
Right. But what my function is working with Dave, one of the first things I did when I got here and I took on an active role in the board of the group was, okay, now that I'm really buckling down to the administrative, I have worked with previous groups and done background stuff for some of them. So one of my things was, all right, let me see what the bylaws look like. If I'm going to follow this, what is it? I read the bylaws and went, oh dear gods, Dave, Lisa, have you guys actually read this? And they're like, no, not really. I kind of glanced
read it,
it,
but we didn't realize some of the implications and what they meant. Like, in
So-
other words, like when we read something, we're like, we didn't see the next step that could have been taken with that, because
Right.
we would never think about something like that.
So
you know, so it was more of our own naivete, not our inability to read.
Yeah. No. It was more just a like it was a holy cow. This bylaw is written so that we're not supposed to be able to become a cult as an organization. There's a ton of stuff written in here so that basically 2 people could have taken over the entire group, and there was
and really one person, if
one
it was,
person,
yeah, like meaning because literally there was a clause about
where,
like that
where
I
yeah.
mean, like the position that I was in would have had the ultimate say. Now, luckily, I'm not an egomaniac. You know?
So over, especially the last 5 years, my function has been to rewrite the bylaws. That was one of my
And
first
you did it.
projects.
And you did it.
I took a 18-page document. It's now like 20 something.
Yeah.
But I had to take I spent probably 6 months in the first part of 2020 completely just dismantling. Well, no, not 2020, maybe 2021.
I think.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah. I spent
and I think we finally started putting it back together in 2022 because Draco was on the board at that point, because I remember him being one of the signers.
But we had to I had to completely dismantle it and go, hey guys, this doesn't work, because outside of magic, one of my things, especially the last 8 years, has been corporate management, running stores, running my most recent one. I'm not working right now. I'm gearing up for my move, but was taking a failing warehouse and turning it around and increasing its productivity, writing whole new things. So what I bring both magically and administratively is looking at things and bringing ways of incorporating new ideas. So with Dave and Lisa's permission, my first project, and took me about 6 months, was completely shredding 18 pages of material and going, nope, this needs to go out. Nope, this can't be done. I like this aspect. And so I spent probably 6, maybe even closer to 8 months just constantly, everyone looking at me. What are you doing, Dak? I'm on page 7. I'm on page 9 of 18. What are you doing now? Rewriting this entire page
because it's like messed up.
It's messed up. And so that's what I've been doing magically for the group. Is I rewrote the entire bylaws, sent them to Dave and Lisa. They refined them. And then now we're at the point where, while we still haven't named everything,
but that's okay, because we're going to be redoing them anyway when we do the formalization of our new name and all of the stuff. So we have time. It's fine.
But as part of that, I've been working on with Dave and others to create curriculum and to basically start making the spiritual side, the sanctuary side, because I don't like the word church or anything.
I don't either.
I refer to each
and
of
Coven is too limiting for people that don't resonate with that. Grove is too limiting.
And that's also very
Yeah.
Grove and Coven, those are very witchcraft and Wicca
very
oriented,
pagan, very druidic, very and they're not welcoming to the Christians in our group, because we do have some Christians in our group, but a church is not welcoming to, so we just have this like conundrum.
And Grove
like,
is a very druid thing.
Good vocabulary availability
so
with that.
We're working on that, but where we're going with the sanctuary side, and that's one of the things I've been, especially the last year, really hammering out. is creating. It's part of the rebrand, part of the whole thing,
Yeah.
is creating an
It's
aspect
really exciting.
where Tia Eldalieva will still exist. Because so much work has been done in it that what we're doing is Way of Arda's lore. What at the moment, what I'm expanding into is creating a aspect of the organization in which, if you come at it from an elven lens, like myself, like Lisa does, and others, then you would join Tia Eldalieva. You would still be Way of Arda's lore, but for lack of a better term, consider it like the Harry Potter houses. You attend Hogwarts,
right,
but you're sorted into Ravenclaw.
right,
You know,
right.
So
I'd
within
be
this,
Hufflepuff, but anyway.
no one admits to that. No.
Hey,
But
I mean, hey, they were the ones that like could work with the mandrake, so you know.
but
I took one of those tests and it detected me as Slytherin. So, you know, there
I
you
could
are.
see
Oh, shocker.
Shocker. But Melgen says I'm a proud
Awesome.
Hufflepuff. But so in that concept of a framework, what I'm working with is when people join Way of Arda's lore, we're going to have, Dave's already put together really good material on the initial curriculum, books to read, to familiarize.
I love the core part of the curriculum. It's so good. It's so good.
The idea on the sanctuary side, and that is going to be a formal clergy type. I hate the term clergy, but that's all I
know,
have
but
at the
it's
moment.
the best one we have for now. To be continued.
If you approach it from a spirituality that is the Elven, then you would join Tia Eldalieva. Now, below that, I'm working on the idea of sort of an Elven tribes, and each area can then further break down. I've come up with this whole idea to where individual heads of leadership basically will be able to hold groups in their own area after you complete a training process. And so that's for those with the Elven aspect. And that would focus a lot more on the Valar and different ideas and different paths there. For those, I have a buddy of mine who is doing studying and stuff, and part of Way of Arda's lore. He doesn't come online as much due to work. But he's always been interested in the Tolkien material from the way of the Dwarven aspect. He's always loved the North's Dwarven lore and things like that. In that aspect, for him and others, as we encounter them, you would join a group called, the overall group is called Anvil's Creed, and then you would join a local Dwarven clan in that area. Melgen's about hobbits. I haven't gotten to that part yet. The interesting one is when you look at the Legendarium and incorporating into a pagan aspect, what I'm trying to do with my years of training is, and Dave and Lisa help with this, is stay true to the writings. So the dwarves, for example, in their setup, they would go with Alule, which is the Elven name, but Mahal or maker is the Dwarven term. There's not a ton of those words out, but dwarves approaching a spirituality as our organization is growing, dwarves would have no interest in Iluvatar fully, nor would they have any interest in the Valar. As Dave would tell you, they pretty much are interested solely in Mahal. So those of the Dwarven aspect, I'm writing rituals, I'm writing oaths of initiation, I'm writing a ton of material in the back end where they would focus a Dwarven, someone who resonates with the dwarves would be focusing very much on craftsmanship type things, eventually maybe they have interests in blacksmithing, things like that, but they're approaching it from pretty much Mahal, and that's solely. The elves are approaching much more of the Valar and Iluvatar, though that one's an interesting. The other thing that always resonated was I love that Iluvatar created things and then wandered off to play with other toys. So it's more the Valar. He kind of just said, I made you guys, you take care of this. I'm going to go play with that new car over there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got a new world to make or something. And then the third sort of house at the moment, eventually, Mel, I'll have to do something along the hobbits. That's an interesting one as well, and how they interacted with Arda. But
well, and I think gardening would be a fantastic path for them.
The third one I'm currently working on creating right now is a human aspect for those that aren't elves, aren't human, or aren't elves, aren't dwarves, aren't hobbits, and don't resonate with any of that spiritually. The humans were even more interesting in a sense, in that in the Legendarium, they didn't deal with the Valar hardly at all. They dealt with their ancestors. They didn't,
particularly the Númenóreans and even Rohan. Yeah.
Well, especially Rohan and stuff. Mm-hmm. If you look at as Dave will know, when Theoden, it's in the movies, and I'm not sure, I can't remember, Dave, if it's in the books, correct me if I'm wrong, but especially in the movies, in the third Lord of the Rings movie, Return of the King, when Theoden is dying, he doesn't say, I go to Iluvatar, I go to the Valar. He literally talks about, I go to the halls of my ancestors. Yeah, I go to see my kin.
Peter Jackson took that directly from the book text.
Okay. So that very much shows that the human aspect will focus very much, and it's where especially people of, say, a Christian background. I have nothing against it, and I know that having been raised in it, the idea of I'm going to pray to a Valar is so counterintuitive to anything that a church would accept that it makes a conflict. How do I stay true to my church without compromising, my Tolkien interest in this and that? For people like that, the human side would be, Nimue fellow hobbit. Looks like I have more work. Thanks, guys. No, it's all good. But for people along those lines, the human aspect would be a great place for people of Catholic backgrounds, Christian backgrounds, because the humans didn't acknowledge necessarily Iluvatar, so you could leave it up to
well, the Númenóreans did, but
the Númenóreans did. Yeah, the others didn't,
because they were kind of closer to that, having had a blend of elven blood in their bloodlines,
right.
So makes sense. Yeah.
So the human aspect for people would be much more resonant, because you would be focusing on sort of working with your ancestors, working with things like, so where we're branching is very much finding things that are authentic to Tolkien and authentic to the framework he left, but allow people to find the way to resonate best. And previously we didn't have that. And one of the things that impacts me, Lisa, I forgot to bring this up, but this is a good segue.
Do it now.
So one of the things
we like surprises
is in 2009. And again, if people have questions about this, even though it's not spiritual, there's very little that I'm obligated not to say. So I'll segue with that. In 2009, I actually ended up years ago, and this isn't necessarily pagan related, but it's interesting in how it's shaped my thought processes. 2009, I joined the Freemasons in California I was working at a hospital through a friend of mine's. Her dad was the master of the lodge. They call it the worshipful master. And through her and a bunch of stuff, I got into that. Late 2009, I went through my first degree, my second degree, and then early 2010, I did my third. From there, I actually went and joined an organization called York Rite, which goes through more degrees, and eventually you go through what's called commandery orders, and that leads to like a Masonic Knights Templar. Out here in Hawaii, I've been active in my local lodge, and then 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I lost track. I joined another organization, Masonic, that's called Scottish Rite, that goes from 4th degree all the way to 32nd degree, and eventually 33rd. And I know the conspiracy theories, everyone's like, oh, that's where you find out all the real things. No, it's you spend 8 years as what they call a black hat, a 32nd. And then after 8 years, you're eligible to be granted your 33rd, usually through service to the lodge, like philanthropically donating, working with new people type thing. It's an honorary, nothing more. So it's an interesting, but that as a whole has shaped where the organization for me is going. And part of the reason is I wanted to create something where everyone has a place. And the thing I've loved about Lodge, the really interesting thing, is my current lodge. There is a Jewish individual, actually two, who were raised in strict Jewish homes. There's a handfuls of Christians, a few Catholics. There's about 4 or 5 of us that are practicing pagans.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I originally had told Dave and Lisa a lot was I wanted to model one of the things that's done in Lodge is we don't talk about politics and we don't discuss religion. They're divisive subjects in Lodge. Outside of Lodge, we often do, and it leads to a ton of fun conversations. But concepts in there are very much a fluid idea. What? Go ahead, Dave.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
But the idea was that we can all come to Lodge, no matter what faith we're from, and all find something within the organization that enriches us as individuals and doesn't cause us to have to fight, argue, assert dominance. And so that the probably 15 years of Freemasonry that I've been involved with has very much impacted that when we were just Tia Eldalieva, I felt we were far too exclusive. And we excluded a lot of people because
yeah, and I got really sick of it due to the elf derangement syndrome,
Mel says she has to leave. It's been a pleasure having you here, Mel.
We understand. You have a wonderful one. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate that.
Definitely. And so, but where that has impacted, that actually has, while it's not directly pagan related, it has overall affected my journey as much as my mentor did, and led to a idea to where I'm like, okay, going forward, how do we create an organization that is inclusive, that has something for everyone, and we're not going to devolve into fighting and bickering of, yo, only the Elven points are correct, and Dave's nuttier than than a
Well, I mean,
planner's
that never
backwards.
happened, but I could
No.
see how in more rigid personalities that could be something.
Well, I've seen covens
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
start. I've seen covens where they
The
break
technical
down.
term
yeah.
is crazier than a shithouse rat.
The technical term.
The technical term. But yeah, so even things like that have impacted how do I all of my training and whether it's my Masonic training or my magical has led me to helping the group in ways of going, okay, how can we be more inclusive? How can we each find resonance? Because like I said, Masonically, we stand there and we use the term great architect of the universe, or we use the term occasionally God, but we're not talking about the Christian God. I'm talking, they mention God and I'm sitting here going, Iluvatar. The Jewish guy next to me is mentioning something else. The Muslim, 4 people
Allah.
down is doing Allah. The pagans in the group or whoever, deity they're doing.
Yes.
And yet we all resonate differently. And our journeys as Masons has all been impacted, each of our lives different.
The idea of the Masons allowing for, I guess because they definitely don't really support the idea of hard polytheism, like heathenry, for instance. However, if we can get to an understanding, and I'll put that in quote marks, okay, in the air, of that there is one source, there's one energy, one kind of like cosmic soup that we all are part of, then I think that is what can make it work, like regardless of quote a religion,
Well, even from
and I've actually modeled a little bit of that with Tia eldalieva, except I'm more open and even allow polytheism if that's what's going on.
So ultimately in Lodgen, it's what I've tried to incorporate, especially into the different houses and different things that I'm creating. Actually, they do allow polytheism. And here's how.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, here's how. As someone who, when I first joined was, like I said in my interview, I've been an eclectic pagan. At the time, I was very Norse oriented. In 2009. So there's a couple states that are in essence blacklisted because they went outside of what we accept. So like my Grand Lodge here in Hawaii has said, no, we do not recognize them. And I can't go to lodges, lodge meetings in their states, and they can't come to ours because they are blacklisted. But overall, and I know Tennessee's one of them, and I think Missouri or Kentucky is the other. I can't remember.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on your whole Freemason background.
So,
I mean, we just barely. It just kind of got thrown in.
we'll address that. But so from a polytheistic standpoint, it works, and it was like when I did my first, second, and third degree. I actually did my oaths on the poetic Eddas and the sagas, because usually you use they have a Bible, but it's more a symbolic representation of a volume of sacred law. But if you're not, if you're pagan like me, I got permission and I used the like poetic Eddas. You could use the Havamal. You could use a few others. In the U.S., in 48 states, 2 of them, this is why I said they got blacklisted. All that's required is a belief in a supreme being. So even in a polytheistic standpoint, Odin in the Norse
is a supreme being.
Is the highest. I don't necessarily have to work with Odin. I just have to answer, do you believe in a supreme being? Well, Odin is the supreme being of the Norse pantheon. Even most polytheistic pagans tend to have over the years, they tend to have one sort of primary patron with other patrons that they follow. So it does work polytheistically. It very much does. That being said, the two states I mentioned, Tennessee for sure, and Kentucky went rogue, or Missouri or whoever it was. I'd have to look. There's always discussions on who the second one was. We all know Tennessee. But basically they went outside of the rules of the group and stated that you had to be pretty much a fundamentalist Christian from only accepted paths. You could not be gay, you could not be pagan, you could not anything. And if you didn't like it, tough.
That's the over cultural influence of the basically Trumpanzee crowd here. So
well, it's also that Tennessee and the one other state that went this way are both in the Bible Belt.
Right,
and
right.
they got enough people who basically went against Masonic principles and implemented this, and that got them blacklisted from everyone else. But
interesting.
Yeah. But so like I said, that a lot of what even that journey along with my pagan journey and along with my mundane journey have all led to the skill set that I have with you guys and what we're trying to create in finding something that works for everyone and reaching a point where, for me, the Legendarium is, for at least me, my primary belief system, like it is with Dave. And
yeah,
at this point it would seem weird to me to be anything else.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I forgot to paste your elf derangement syndrome article. I'm doing that right now. Cool. Sorry about that.
Oh, that article's hilarious.
Because it's pretty funny. And I'm going to show it on the screen for anybody that wants to screenshot it and then type it if they want to in the chat. I may also put it in the comments after, like, for the replay people, so that they won't have to do all of that. But
since I mentioned herding cats, and I even put that famous Super Bowl commercial where they're trying to herd cats.
Merlin thinks that's funny.
But at this point, I think we've reached pretty much what my pagan background, my sort of corporate.
Yeah, you did your childhood, you did your elven connection, you did your formal training with Karen, you did, well, I mean, it's interspersed, but we know now that you have Freemason training. You've had a lot of studies with lots of different paths, but you had a really good core because of Karen. You also have a really deep core with Christianity because you were in the soup. My God.
Oh, I was heavily.
You were in the soup.
Yeah, no,
so you know a lot about that as well. And
I grew up heavily in that world as well.
Yeah. So. I didn't, so that'll be a different interview, but so we, I think you covered a lot. You also covered, like how you came to us, how, and you found us through Kimber-El. We also talked about your work with the bylaws, which we're so appreciative. When we get to the place where we're gonna, make the new bylaws again, when we reincorporate with a new name and a new everything, and actually, I'm actually thinking about, so because we're kind of in this weird place where there's just like our number. For those of you who don't know, we talked about this with our patrons, but our number had gotten deactivated by our prior board member because the IRS continues, regardless of how many times that we've talked to them, to honor her prior position, even though she's not there anymore.
But yet they
and
also
and
still.
then she told us that it was like, you know, the IRS is taking away your privilege. Well, that's not true.
I was gonna say they
So
they
we
let
can
us.
actually, so here's the thing. I found out that we are not breaking the law because I talked to the IRS. I have it in my book, like who I talked to, everything. We are not breaking the law. However, if any of you who are doing patron stuff and want to write it off of your taxes, if you guys need to reactivate, like in other words, if you are writing it off of your taxes, we will reactivate our number for you because it's actually for you so that like when you can write it off of your taxes. To my knowledge, though, none of you are doing that. So
there is also a potential problem where we found out that EIN number was being like shared into some sort of shell corporation.
Meaning there were people that were using it for a substitute when other people's numbers were not good anymore, and they were borrowing ours in order to collect money, which we never saw, and it's in a different bank account and like we don't even know what is going on with that. Some bank, you know, some church in Orange County, like a Christian church.
But from what we could tell, that was also the former. I think that was
absolutely it was the former board member, like sharing our number with. By the way, like, I mean, you know, like if we knew what was going on and we'd be like, oh yeah, like we'll help them, or, you know, like there was no discussion about it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So, anyway.
I know Lisa, I know Lisa doesn't want the name spoken, but I shall name by my nickname, Crazy A. That's who.
That's fine.
There's a comment from Nimue. I wanted to say thank you for that, and I've enjoyed sharing my experiences and what led me to this group and what I bring to it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, because I mean, well, and actually Draco and you didn't get to really connect very much. So I could see where they kind of didn't get to really know you very well.
No, when I came in, it was Kimberell had left. But that wasn't what triggered you guys bringing me in.
No, we wanted to make sure that you were coming in on a clean slate. We didn't want you involved with that. It was
right. And I actually came in right after, as Dave mentioned, Crazy A left.
Or we asked her to leave.
she politely, she was asked to leave.
We tried to be polite. Uh-huh.
But anyway, that's old water under bridge. But yeah, that's when I came in. So I didn't interact a whole lot with Draco at that time. So,
yeah.
Well,
we still have, I mean, one of our most popular videos happens to have Draco involved in it. And, you know, like keeps being hit on because of all of the controversy that happened. I mean, we're like, okay, keep feeding our algorithm. And then they're like, you're just doing this to get your algorithm up. And we're like, no, actually it was to educate our community, but you guys are totally giving us a lot of stuff without us asking. No problem.
That was the whole Dragon Bloodline video with that crazy bitch.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
Lisa, Vera Faith says that she thinks she found our group through Kimberell as well.
I am positive that that's the case. I would say, no, literally, most of our patrons actually found us through Kimberell, and so I'm extremely thankful for that.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, we even had one that joined us. She kind of did a paid membership and then changed it to a free membership. Maybe she didn't know what was going on. It's fine. But she found us through following Kimberell's channel and realizing that she hasn't made content lately. So she started looking for other people. She found us. So that was... So Kimberell is still actually inadvertently bringing people to our path. So I'm very thankful for that.
And then, like I said, at this point, if they come up in the comments, I'll see them and address them after we're done with the live stream. And then if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer, regardless of all of the stuff.
And a lot of you, if you don't know how to, so on, how many people are named Dakyndre Helgesson? I mean, you'll find him more easily than you will have found me on Facebook as being Lisa Allen with 5,000 Lisa Allens. Okay, so find Dakyndre, and he's our president. So, he's available. If you guys have questions, you can also leave them in the comments, because after we wrap up the live stream, thank you, Merlin. After we wrap up the live stream, the live chat is going to close down, but the comments, which is below the video, will open up. And so we'll make sure that there are answers for you.
Absolutely.
If you have other questions, like maybe you have some curriculum questions, maybe you have, and by the way, like there has been other videos where we talk about things, and
right.
We have like Patreon posts that we talk about things.
And
like we have documents that we can share and things like that. But if you have other things, maybe you want to know more about Dakyndre's background, about like a certain aspect, like, hey, what is your expertise in blah, blah, blah area? We definitely want to hear from you. And thank you for letting us know tonight that apparently there is a need for a Hobbit track as well.
Exactly.
We had no idea.
I had thought about getting to that, and I've looked up some mild things on it in terms of stuff. But I hadn't seen anything, and now today there's 3 came up that it was like this, and I'm like, okay, well, apparently we need to work on that too. So that'll be, and that is helpful, because again, as we're finishing up, what my goal is to take all of the years I've spent doing this and ultimately be of service to you guys, to the group members. And I think that's one reason that I've said many times behind the scenes. One thing that works with Dave, Lisa, and I from other groups that you encounter, that I've encountered, is none of us want this title. None of us, I don't need it. I don't need the validation. I'm not here. I'm here to serve. And I took that when I joined the board. It was, I don't want the titles. Nick, call me whatever you need to call me for, administrative purposes. If the title had to be, the orangest orange, then fine, call me that. I don't care. Whatever the title, I don't care. I'm here to
Grand
help.
Poobah.
And that's so ultimately, reach out. And like I said, now I know the Hobbit thing. I'm going to go into creating material. My goal is to be of service to you guys and to make an organization that you guys feel part of and that works for everyone. I want to see in the next few years, we're starting to grow. We've done interviews with a student in Manchester.
The UK.
Manchester, she's moving, but we just did an interview with someone academically who did that. We've done an interview
that she brought us to the Tolkien Society. That has never been done. Other than when Marcus brought our group to the Tolkien meeting, and boy, did he tick some people off. But she did it in a really interesting fashion. Rather than an alternative religion, she brought it in the folkloric aspect. And they opened up the door for her. We're like, oh, this is fabulous.
And so what we're trying to do is we're making inroads into academic communities, and we want to be as much a spirituality as we do an academic, in where we stay authentic and different from anything else out there. So,
absolutely.
And we can only do that with your guys' help. if you go, going, hey, I'm more of the Hobbit aspect. Fantastic. Now I know what I'm going to be writing for, a couple of months now.
Like, well, because you got the Dwarven interest from your friend that you're working with closely, and now,
the Elven
now we have
from
the
several
Hobbit
of us.
aspect. There's the
human
Elven aspect, which is very well traveled all these years.
And we've got
and
the
a human one that we'll have with Numenorian and possibly, because I could see people doing Rohan too. And on that note, I was going to say that Rohan, I think, would be kind of, in a way, very closely aligned with heathenism too.
And what were you going to say, Dave?
Oh, I was just saying, and my whole prime motivation is to work behind the scenes to use my energy to bring both projects forward. In other words, Way of Arda's Lore, and I also have another one, Ilslun Valian, who's going to we have somewhat different focus. So Ilslun Valian now is working on a video with a three-dimensional gaming engine to create an immersive ritual experience for people who can't visualize in the detailed manner that I can. So that's, there's interaction and overlapping between both groups.
And that'll overlap, because that's something like that would be fantastic. So rather than, again, it's how do we incorporate everything and give people a participation area to where we enrich each other instead of feel the need for conflict.
Right, exactly.
Let me type in the West of West.
Oh, Lisa, okay, after you type that, I want to ask, do you have any idea for the people who are watching about when we might be able to do the reincorporation under the new name, or you still kind of
so what we're doing is that okay, so part of it is that we didn't want to do another fundraiser the way we did it with Kimberell. We just felt like that we don't feel that that's right. Okay, we'll handle it ourselves. We are so grateful for all of you who toss us a little bit of coffee money every month through Patreon, because it adds up, okay, and it's really helping. And I mean, it adds up slowly though. That's the problem. And we're not out aggressively like marketing ourselves, because again, we're not doing this for money. But the money that does come, it pays for, it pays for our Google Meet, it pays for our domain names, like some of the things that we need, it pays for. And we're very resourceful, and we know how to do a lot of things for free, like using YouTube, for instance, and things like that. But what we were going to do was, Dakyndre was going to, since he's a board member, we're not technically allowed to take money from him, but we could get a loan from him and potentially pay him back for that particular thing. So he's in the process of selling his house right now in Hawaii. When it all closes and then there's money like left over, he will then provide the entire $600 that we'll need for the new Way of Arda's Lore. And then we will be registering it in Montana rather than in California, because there has been a lot of drama in trying to do it in California with certain boards needing things and the attorney general, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. We do it in Montana. The Secretary of State says, hey, keep up with us every 3 years. Just tell us your normal board members. That's all. And your current info. That's all we need. Well, and so we are going to use a P.O. box that I secured when I was up in Montana for the Way of Arda's Lore. And Tia Eldalieva, I guess, will be like one of the, like it, as Dakyndre talks about it, one of the tracks or one of the houses underneath the umbrella of Way of Arda's Lore. So,
and additionally, like I said, we'll financially we'll figure things out, stay legally. The other thing that I want to do is, if we have to consider it a loan, then we do. But I'm not interested. I ultimately, while staying within the laws, I want the patrons' money to be able to go to projects for them and stuff like that. I'm not I'm not interested in going, hey, what can, in 5 years, can this turn into a private jet? No, I don't care. And I make the joke, but you see it all the time where it's like it becomes a grift or a con. That's not I don't want that. So for me, if anything, I would find a way and just, call it a gift.
It's the Elven House of Andrew Tate, yo.
Oh no.
Joel Osteen.
Oh my goodness. So, well, I mean,
yeah.
Long story short is we're going to be
within the next
doing
couple
that
of
process
months.
Approximately when it coincides with when Dakyndre sells his house. Now, if
That'll be in the
another
next
non-board member wishes to donate the $600, well, we are not going to say no.
But no, like I said, I've got this. And
you know,
it's be
so
in the
wink, wink, Dakyndre, like talk to your friends, okay?
That's why I've said in the next couple of months,
okay.
we'll get this taken care of.
We'll get this taken care of. So my point is that it'll probably be around the spring, like probably the late spring or midsummer, which is the Tarning Austa point. And I think that is a good thing. Meanwhile, I did verify we're not breaking any laws. Like everything's fine. We are
operating legitimately.
Yeah, we're fine. Like they literally said, like, it's okay. You don't have to, because I wondered, oh no, we're not active anymore. Does that mean this, that, the other? And it means none of those things. It means we can still operate. It's just that if other people are trying to write off their tax dollars and they can't because we don't have a quote active standing, that's different. And rather than activating it and having all the problems that we've had with it, we just decided, unless you guys are actually deducting it from your taxes, we will then activate it for you guys. Okay. But so if any of you are using it to deduct on your taxes, please let us know immediately if at all possible, because then we can do it by the tax season this year. But by this time next year, that's not going to be a problem because we're going to have a new number.
We're going to have it new done, and we decided.
And we'll have a bank account in Montana to match like where the PO box is, everything. Yeah.
Will also be one of the things I'm studying, and spirit on the sanctuary side will be great in the coming year. What I want to do is start getting individuals interested in eventually running things in their areas. So besides being registered in the US, I'm also going and I've been researching on getting us registered in like the UK and Scotland when I'm there, so that we can have our groups and stuff there as well. And that would in essence make us the first, we would have an international.
We'll be international at that point.
Right. But and then it can be done. So down the road, it would be something where I want to look, and it doesn't cost much there either. But down the road, as we get more leaders in more countries and more areas, I want to help each individual look at, okay, you're in, Germany. Let's go ahead and figure out what does it take to make an organization in Germany. Sometimes you just need to register, and then cool, you can do weddings,
and sometimes they'll just use our foreign registration and then just say this is a German branch. Yeah.
So ideally, as we grow, we want to create something that will in essence outlive all of us, that becomes much bigger than anything, because both the student in the UK that interviewed us and Dr. Marcus, they all said, as far as they know, we are the first registered, fully legitimate church organization of this type. And we want to make sure that this is around for years.
Yeah, definitely. Is it her? I know her name is Emily, but is it Barnes or Baines?
Baines.
I think it's Baines as well.
Yeah.
So I keep calling Dr. Emily Baines because I want her to get her doctorate.
Well,
she has her master's degree, and she was able to make her presentation on folklore with us, and contrasting that with the canonization of like Catholic Church, and made this presentation that was golden, okay, to the Tolkien Society, still blowing my mind. We have never been able to get a minute of attention from them. And she just got right in the door, and that was awesome.
Yeah, there's always been kind of a mutual hostility between us and the Tolkien Society. So yeah,
exactly.
Mainly because they kind of thought of us originally as,
well, 20 years ago, I mean, they probably just thought, oh, it's one of those crackpot groups, like, meaning those ones that kind of came and went, like back 20 years ago. Like, they probably thought we were one of those.
Covens were popping up all the time, and then
well.
Yeah, covens were 20 years ago. Covens were popping up and dissolving almost overnight.
Yes, they were.
So
and a few of them were doing the Tolkien thing in their path, but they were not based on Tolkien and the Legendarium. They were just using it like flavoring into their pagan path.
Yeah.
I actually wrote to the Tolkien Society around that time. This is like 2006 or thereabouts.
Okay.
And basically explained what we were, and I got zero reply, and
exactly.
I could tell
that's what I'm talking about. It's like I think they looked at it for a minute and went delete, next.
I could tell I could tell shamanically that I was dismissed with extreme prejudice. So I'm like, well, so I put on my
thank you, Dr. Emily.
So I put on my thug ring and said, well, fuck you too, so.
Yeah. So, and by the way, I was going to tell some of the folks that are going to be coming into the core curriculum when we get that going and everything, that we do have some private videos in the back end of YouTube that you can watch the actual interviews that we are getting a hold of, like with the foot in you, if you will, in academia for this path.
Which is giving us a lot more credibility.
It's giving us more credibility and everything in the academic world. And then, we're going to be, getting a little bit more credit. So we're also going to be making a little bit of a movement. And we didn't talk about this yet, Dakyndre. You guys ready? So paganpages.org. Do you want to tell them about your writing position?
So I actually had somehow forgot about that.
No, it's okay. You had a hell of a lot on your list.
So I haven't done it yet. With the new year starting, we're getting ready to go back up. And that will be starting in the next month, within this month. But anyway, it is a volunteer position, but I'm super proud to have been able to do it. There is a group out there online. They've been around since 2006 called paganpages.org. And they are a monthly, well, they do monthly, they do thing, but basically they are a pagan website in which they have writers, columnists who review books and who have their own columns and all of that. And they are well-known, well-established. Within the last month and a half, one of the owners, admins for the organization for Pagan Pages, he made a post in one of the groups I was on. Were there anyone that they were looking for writers? They were looking to add like 4 writers or something, 5 writers. I don't remember, but they were doing some stuff. And was there any interest? And if there was interest, then contact him and he would, meet with you next. Well, I did that, and he responded and was like, okay, you now have a week to come up with a column name and to submit an article that an idea for what your column would look like, for everything, and then we'll meet, we'll review it, we'll pick from all of the submissions that we get, as to who gets in and who is going to be a writer for us. So I did that, and I wrote specifically as, hey, I am a Tolkien spiritualist. This is my column name I came up with was A World Re-energized, and looking specifically at how concepts from Tolkien's work could be given pagan spirituality. I shared with them about the Valar and all of that, and they went absolutely bananas for it, and were like, we want you to join the team. Here's a contract. Here's this and this. So in the coming year, starting sometime this month, I need to reach out to my, I guess now, editor, and ask, hey, when do you want my article? But my work as a columnist will start showing up on paganpages.org, which gives a lot more credibility for my spiritual path, but also for Way of Arda's lore, because we are now going to have a regular presence on paganpages.org as well.
Yeah, that's really great, because we did need to make a better inroads in the pagan community. There's some pagans that have been really open to us, and we're so appreciative. There's been other ones that have been a little abrasive, or just, I don't know what it is, but
back in the day,
I do think that that's changing now. Again, like if the Tolkien Society is opening up to us, maybe the pagan world is as well. And look at this, Nimue says that is very exciting. Congrats.
It's super exciting. Like I said, it's a volunteer, but it's super exciting.
If you remember, Lisa, back in the day, we got more flack from pagans than we did from fundamentalist Christians.
Absolutely.
I referred to them as fundamentalist pagans because they were like,
they absolutely. Yes. I had a similar term. It was very much you're not doing paganism by the book. And we're like, wait, A, we do have a book. It's by Tolkien, but B, what book are you using? Oh, wait, the guy, the one that was using Tolkien's language in their own calendar. So, it's kind of funny that story happened.
But yeah, so overall, the organization's going, we're doing a lot, and I am so pleased to be able to work with all of you guys, and I want to be available, reach out, contact, ask questions. If you don't see something, if you're like, hey, like we said earlier, hey, I identify as a hobbit, there's no spiritual aspect. One of the things I looked at in my articles is ways of incorporating the mundane into specifically the magical, making tasks, because so many people, they only do magic on the full moon, or they only do it this, when it can be so much more. And one of the things I was looking at was, the hobbits might have just found, and Dave, we'll need to look at this together, but one thing, hobbit spirituality may be completely different, but a lot of what they do is take pleasure in everything. Everything is in the moment. They very much live.
That's true. And also they were very much agrarians. So, planting and growing things was a very part of their culture.
They were the original, in astrological terms, we would call them astrologically, archetypally, a Taurus energy.
They very much so. That can absolutely be incorporated in a spirituality that looks for, which we can work on that, but it looks for the magic in everyday moments rather than something insanely ceremonial.
There's already a book on that, actually, too. I need to find it.
So,
I think I have it in my Kindle.
So, as you guys reach out and tell us things, we can incorporate things to make everything work better for you guys. That's ultimately what my goal is to be of service to you. This isn't about, hey, stroke my ego. No, I'm here for you guys.
None of us, I mean, I think all three of us are not about ego. And in fact, it's very interesting.
I would point out real quick, Dave's a Tiger Therian. Thereby as a cat,
okay, well, but even
Yeah.
then, it's
Well,
still...
that is true. You speak the
it is
truth
true,
on that
but it's not, though, too.
No, I know.
Your reasons, Dave, are still resonant in authenticity rather than, domination over other people.
Well, that's true. I mean, I am hostile by nature, especially when people off the internet who I don't know from jack shit come in saying you're doing it wrong, and I'm like, you don't even know what the fuck I'm doing, asswipe. So back off. Yeah.
But
it's a good thing we have a sense of humor and understand what you mean by all of those things. Because we know it's like, oh yeah. That is not making Dave happy. Next.
Yeah, no, I think overall I've covered everything that I needed to cover.
Okay, so I do have people, if they want to get a hold of you, I wrote your email address in terms that are, and interesting that Nimue says she has a Taurus moon, and that moon in Taurus is actually exalted there. So the Hobbit life is only natural. Yeah.
So
that's brilliant. Yeah.
That will be more projects I will start working on, is how to incorporate a fourth house of the Hobbit inspired individuals and what that would look like. So that'll be a new project.
And on the note of astrology, I was going to ask you how much astrology happened in your formal training with Karen. I was curious. Not very much?
Not very much.
Okay.
To be completely honest,
she might not have been an astrologer, which is fine. I just was curious. Some witches are astrologers too. So.
She wasn't. But what I've done is oftentimes I've supplemented. Over the years, I've supplemented where I know people like you, where I know there's a wonderful in-depth astrologer that I know out here on the island, a local Hawaiian guy.
Nice.
And I will oftentimes reach out to him, and I kind of know in areas where I'm weaker in. And astrology's never been one that I've I've never been great at it. And I'm a
weirdo. There's no question about it.
For myself, it's never been one that I'm strong in, nor, to be completely honest, have I ever had the interest in.
Well, you have other tools that you can access faster, and it takes a long time to learn astrology properly.
And all of the astrologers that I know, you guys, and I use that just generically, you guys are hardcore into the astrology. Like the one guy out here,
it is a language.
It's a lifestyle. When he's not working, he's not working, he's researching and he's delving, and so half the time I'm just like, rather than direct my energy there, I'll just reach out and be like, hey, question, this thing here, what can you tell me about? And my guides are telling me something about something in March, and he'll be like, and then I just get a dump back from on social media of,
here's what's going on in March astrologically.
This is going to move into this, and this house is going to do this, and someone's rating this street astrologically. So, and I'm just like,
okay, there it is. Thank you.
So most astrologers I know are, hardcore
we're freaking weird, and we do live in our heads, and that is a danger, by the way, when it comes to not living our lives. If we're overly focused on a chart and not living out in the world, that can become a problem. So there are some astrologers who need a little bit more life balance. One of the things that I love about being an herbalist is that it makes you go outside. It makes you interact with the plant world. And even if you don't have the plants there, you are still at least getting plants, even if they're from a store, and tasting them with your body. Okay. And it's not in your head. This literally is something that I think astrologers actually need to learn how to do, is to get out of their head sometimes.
And he's like, this person I know, he's really good, but he's on the spectrum. He's on the spectrum,
yeah.
and he's,
I'm sure that we all are.
he's
but
specifically like along the lines of like Asperger's. And
okay.
So being in a dungeon, as he calls it, his house.
Okay, that's a whole other
dungeon,
thing. Yeah.
He will commit wholeheartedly to it. And so it's like, I've got nothing but mad respect. You're way good at what you do, but I'm not going to bother trying to learn it.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I'm the astrology head of this, class anyway.
I'll just reach out and be
as
like,
far
hey.
as star magic or what have you, and I definitely, I mean, and this will be more in my interview later, but I definitely had to, just like how you had to figure out how dragon work like would fold into who you are as a person, and then how you do your legendarium work. That's kind of what I had to do with astrology, because there's certain alignments that, like, it seems like they're backwards when you look at it in the literal sense, but when you look at it in the energetic sense, you can still do everything. So I've had to learn how to do that,
right?
And by being in this path, as well as being an astrologer first, actually.
So, and I think all of us do. It's how we incorporate, certain aspects.
And everybody's journey is different. So, I mean, we don't want anybody to feel like, oh, well, what about my journey? Because it's so different. Yeah, we're all different. So we'll figure, we can maybe help you figure that out. As you traverse it.
Actually, Asperger's syndrome was my primary diagnosis, not before the DSM-5, and they folded it into just autism spectrum. But it's basically the same thing. But what Dakyndre was speaking of earlier, that's called hyperfocus. I do that when I'm writing my articles, but then again, I don't expect other people to be, writing the article with me, so although that's why I do sometimes send you guys like a whole bunch of emails with different
I know, because you're doing it like when you're thinking about it, and you're just before I forget.
I can spend 18 to 20 hour sessions on writing something like that, because I have it longer than a 24-hour circadian rhythm. It's like 36 hours. So, that's
now, is that typical of the autism spectrum, or is that just typical for you?
It is typical of the autism spectrum in the sense of that the circadian rhythms are altered. It could be longer or shorter than 24 hours, but mine is longer. So.
Wow. Yeah, like quite a bit too. Wow.
But yeah, so we're
very interesting.
I think like you said, it's got different aspects. But yeah, the astrology is interesting. But no, Karen was not a astrologer. She had other talents and stuff. Ironically enough,
I'm poking you as long as I can think of a question before we have to end the video.
I will say though that over the years it came out that one reason we encountered each other was she was very much Elven, not like Tolkien or anything like that, but she was very much an Elven energy. And yeah, so
that makes
she
sense.
That's where she was a huge part.
It might have been the signature that she recognized about why she taught you and not anybody else. Why she rejected
very much
everybody else.
Because she said that she told me years ago that we were talking about it, and I was asking her, I was like, you never took a student, why me? And this was years later, after we were no longer, in a sense, teacher and student. We were more colleague, and eventually she, up until she passed, she was like a grandmother to me. She was just an amazing, more like but she originally said that signaturely, energetically, she knew She said years later that when I walked through the door the first time, she knew I would end up being her student. She said that. She was like, she's like, the day you walked in, she was like, I knew that eventually I would end up training you.
Wow.
So energetically, yeah.
So, and it might have even
passing.
been like in some viewpoints from like people who could read like Akashic record contracts, like it might have been like, here's a contract, right?
And yeah, she very much, she said she'd always known that at the time that she would train me, and she never did take another student ever. She did the 5 years training with me, and then that was that. She never trained anyone else.
Awesome. And it looks like we got to wrap up here. I've got a client that is like, knock, knock. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's almost 7 o'clock.
Oh, yeah. We've been on for a while.
In California. So,
4:50.
Gosh, this has been a fantastic interview, Dakyndre. And I want to thank you for making time for this before you get buried into selling your house, moving to Scotland.
Not a problem.
And all
and
of
I
the
will
stuff,
still be,
you know.
Yeah, even with all of that, anyone that has questions or some, you know, like Lisa said, leave it in the comments. Even with the move, setting up a new business in Scotland and everything, don't hesitate to reach out. It may take me a day or two to get back to you, but I absolutely will answer, and I will be available for anything needed.
Yeah, awesome. By the way, search Dakyndre Helgesson with the spelling, and you won't find anybody else. I'll almost guarantee it. It's not like searching for me, Lisa Allen, okay, where you get 5,000 people. You can find Dakyndre pretty easily on social media. However, if you are not on social media, or if you're not finding something, just, you know, do it in the email that I dropped, and I'll drop it one more time. Dakyndre Helgesson at hotmail.com. So, yep. Awesome. So I want to thank everyone that has come tonight, and many, many blessings over this week and the weekend. And the next holiday we have, so we do have a really treacherous, I mean, because I looked at the astrology of this, we have a very treacherous full moon coming up. So I would ask people if they can be around cheerful, loving people as much as possible, and out of the way of like lots of temper. Okay. That would be very good for you this weekend, because we have some really crazy astrology happening with this full moon. Okay. This would be, in the tradition, this would be the full moon of Iole the Smith. This would be Isil, not Isil Ring Array, that's December. Isil Narvigne, right? That's the one with the new flame. Yeah,
new sun. Yeah.
Isil Narvigne, and it has to do with Iole the Smith, who interestingly made the dwarves, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, and I want to try to get back on schedule with some of our rituals again. Sorry that I've just had a lot of things. I'm trying to make money, and I'm involved with other you know, covens and things like that right now. I'm doing guest speaking, I'm teaching dowsing, I'm doing all kinds of things, and I mean, I need the money. Sorry guys, but like, if there's, you know, opportunities for that, I've got to do it. So I've had to scale back a little bit. I am in one place for a little while though. I'll probably be here in San Diego until the spring minimally. So, you know, there is some stability there. And so I'd like to get some more of these videos done. My interview, the channeling one for Tolkien, and then the list, and Dave knows what I'm talking about, because we have a list of ideas that we want to present. And that list may even grow more as Dave continues to just write and write and write. And we want him to write, boy, let me tell you, like, please keep going. And it's great that you can do that for 36-hour days. You know what I'm saying? Like, go for it. We love it.
I get on a roll, so you know.
Yeah. Look at this, Starflower. Hey, girl. Thank you for another awesome live stream. And Merlin sends his stars. And this was wonderful. Thank you and take care.
All
okay.
Right.
So we'll go ahead and end the stream. Have a good night and a good weekend, you guys. You take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Have a good night. Bye, and thanks
and
again for showing up,
happy
everyone.
Isil Darvinye. Bye.